Leaders who follow, it sounds like an oxymoron, but if you can't follow, if you never learn to listen, defer, or collaborate, you're missing the foundation that every great leader needs. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalyst, the podcast with Shanita B. I am your host. This is where we discuss how a thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at a crossroads can be the catalyst for change in your leadership and career. So we are starting the year strong because we're getting into some leadership skills that we do not often hear about because the room is made for awareness, accountability, executive presence. And while I think that all of those things are important, you have to have a solid foundation on which to build your leadership style. Otherwise, you will be missing out on some major opportunities. And in the meantime, you're probably ruining some really potential relationships. Okay. So just like you've heard that reading is fundamental, well, so is followership. And it might sound backwards to hear that leaders should be good followers, but I want you to hear me out because followership is not an abdication of duty or surrender of authority, but really it's an ability to yield to the excellence of others. And that's how I want you to think about that, because you would want someone to yield to the excellence that you bring, the expertise that you bring. So it's helpful and it's courteous, and not only that, it helps to build a rapport when you demonstrate those same characteristics. Okay. So I want you to do this. Show your ability to follow by hitting the follow button so that you don't miss an episode. And you can do this in Apple or Spotify, or you can also go straight to my website, crossroadsandcatalyst.com, and hit the follow button there. And it will make sure that you are notified of every new episode. And also, don't forget to sign up for the Catalyst, which offers you weekly leadership briefs, and it's delivered directly to your inbox. And they are just that, brief. So when we get to the struggle that we might be having, well, we're talking about the effectiveness of your leadership and that people hesitate to follow you. And maybe you've heard the quote that if you are a leader and you look behind you and see that no one's following, then all you're doing is taking a walk because you're not leading anyone. And what we want to do is we want to remove any of the hindrances for people to follow in your footsteps, right? Because what I think about when I think about following, I think not necessarily of copying and mimicking your behavior, but I think of seeing someone set an example and following suit. It really is pretty simple. And I think about dance when I think about leadership because I can see leadership in just about everything. But dance is one of those things that stands out, and one of the reasons why is because I dance. I'm a dancer. I've been doing the DFW swing out for probably 15 years or so. And if you're unfamiliar with it, it's a form of West Coast swing. So it's a pretty formal dance, a basic eight-step count. But anyway, it really does teach you a lot about following a partner. It teaches the person who is supposed to lead what they should look for and how they should assist their partner. And it teaches the partner what they should look for and how to assist their leader, right? The lead dance. And so when you think about it, I know that some people, you just get a little squeamish when you hear dance because maybe you feel like you have two left feet, but it's not necessarily how you look when you dance. It's the process of learning the dance. That's when you really understand how good or not so good of a follower you might be. And one of the things that it does is, of course, it's going to expose your vulnerability because there are a lot of people, if they like dance, but they're just hesitant to try it, or maybe they really don't like dance because they already feel like they don't have the ability to do it. There's a resistance to even trying to learn it. Well, when you think about leadership and teams and how you have to navigate those relationships, there's a push and a pull. There are some cues that are given, and there are some signals that should be received. And if any of those things get mixed up or confused, well, then you're going to have some trouble because what you're relying upon is the communication. And sometimes that communication is non-verbal. So I want to give you some signs that will help you to understand if you might be demonstrating poor followership. And I'm going to also give you a more formal definition as to how I'm using that in this context in just a moment. Okay, so here's number one. Your default is to be skeptical rather than supportive. And so what happens is when you're one of your team members, they propose an idea, your first instinct is to find flaws rather than to explore possibilities. So already you have put your team member in opposition toward you because you have been skeptical. Now, I'm all for asking questions and trying to think through, is this really a good idea? But there's a way that you can do that without undermining your team and making them feel as if they're just idiots and are unable to contribute anything that is meaningful and valuable. Number two, you refuse to course correct when evidence says pivot. This is probably one of the worst things. And I know that all of us can probably relate when you recognize that an idea that was implemented and put into place, it maybe did not take long to realize that, ooh, this was probably not the right decision. It doesn't matter, how you ended up at that decision, but now that it's enacted, it's not yielding the results that you anticipated. Well, now you have to at least recognize and acknowledge that it's not working. And so when you refuse and you dig in and say, okay, well, we're just going to stay the course, well, you're continuing to set yourself and your team up for failure. And then number three, well, you resent shared credit. And so the thought of others receiving recognition makes you uncomfortable. And what that does is it's revealing that you're more invested in personal glory than team success. And it also highlights that there may be some envy and some jealousy there. So I want you to think critically about that and how any of these three signs may be applicable to you. Okay, so when we get some clarity about how I'm using followership in this context, I'm defining it basically as this. It's your willingness to yield to the solution that best meets the need of the problem, regardless of the origination of the idea. Okay, so you definitely have to be in a position where you are okay to adopt someone else's solution because it's the best one. And it does not have to be your idea. That is what is key. And so this is part of the reason why I think of this like a dance, because even when someone else is leading, you still have an essential role to play. And everyone gets the chance to shine. That's the good thing about dance. Okay. And like I said, I see leadership in everything. And this is why I wanted to point to at least using dance as the metaphor. And then secondly, again, I love swing out. And as I'm going through this podcast, I'm thinking I might just add a video of some of my dances so that you can take a look at it. But anyhow, when you understand the mechanics of any formal dance, that the leader gives cues, he or she understands the partner's strengths and weaknesses. You listen to the partner's ideas of what's working or not. There's the timing, of course, because you got to be synchronized. Then you can easily see the leadership dynamic. And again, for those of you who have not taken any formal dance, if you like to move when you hear one of your favorite songs, it's still applicable to you. Okay. And one thing that we want to make sure that we recognize when you're a leader, it's not a solo. This is not a solo performance. Okay. And you can not only be concerned with yourself, precisely because there are other people to consider. And it is your role to consider them. You must be able to collaborate, coordinate, observe. You sometimes are going to have to overcompensate for the shortcomings of team members because maybe they'll miss something. And so you have to be vigilant and look out for them. And additionally, you're going to have to yield to someone else's expertise, which actually requires that you acknowledge that they have expertise. It does not mean that you are not skilled. It does not mean that you are not intelligent. It does not mean that you should not be in your position. But what it does mean is that you recognize that there is something unique and beneficial that someone can bring other than you as far as ideas and innovations to the table. That's what that demonstrates. And additionally, you got to be able to follow cues. And what does this mean? You got to be able to read the room. You got to be able to see what's going on, who's capable of what, and how they can take it and run with it. You do not want to rob your team of opportunities to grow and advance. And For some of you, you probably have some really sharp people on your team. It's wonderful to have them. Uh, sometimes they've made your life easier. I've had team members like this where they're unicorns basically, and it is a joy to have them because they do what they need to do. They are not bothersome. They contribute in ways that you just really can't fully appreciate, right? But you want to give them opportunities to grow and to stretch. So you have to learn to follow the cues, and you must learn some timing, right? You got to be able to understand when is the best time to do something, when is the best time to withhold something, right? So this is what I want to make sure that you understand. If your cues are rough or harsh, or they're unclear, or they're missing, or they're ill-timed, then the problem is not the team. The problem may be you and how you're communicating information. Because when you communicate something, you're giving a cue to your team. So I want you to ask yourself this question. If I were a member of my team, would I want me as a leader? Think about that for a minute, because that's important. Because you're asking other people to follow you. But if you wouldn't follow yourself as a leader, well, then it's time for you to understand the struggle that they might be experiencing, right? So what is this going to do when you come to this realization? Well, it's going to make you vulnerable. And this is going to show your humanity. And it's also going to make you relatable, which also points to your humanity. And then finally, it's going to show that you're teachable, which demonstrates your humility. People enjoy working for leaders who can demonstrate that they are relatable, that they are vulnerable, and that they are teachable or humble, right? All of this is going to make you a better leader. And just so we're aware, people do not warm up to those leaders who are distant. It's a rare thing that happens. So then what choices do you have? While there's always the temptation to continue business as usual, I know that those of you who are still listening, you're not interested in continuing business as usual. You want to do something different because you want to demonstrate that you are a capable and strong leader. So that's not the option. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep it simple. You can give credit where credit is due and when it's due. You don't want to wait. You want to offer it when you recognize it. And then number 2, course correct or pivot. And how does this play out? Well, if something has occurred and maybe you weren't willing initially to change the process, well, you can just go back and have a conversation and say, I was thinking about the solutions that you provided, and I recognize that we are not in the place where we thought that we would be when this decision was made. Okay, I think it's time for us to try something else. If you approach it with humility and just go for it, people will be receptive to that. Okay, so then number 3, show support for your team. So instead of saying no, it won't work, or just being very off-putting, why don't you try thinking through or considering ways that it could work, or just asking questions to flesh it out? And I mean being genuine and sincere. Because the more you ask questions, the more interest that you show, then your team will be more apt to approach you with ideas. Even if the ideas ultimately don't get chosen for implementation, they will at least recognize that you listen to them. People want to be heard. Okay. So my recommendation is that you choose at least one of these and that you do it within the next 7 days, because you want to act fast. And I think that this is really appropriate because we're at the start of a new year. If your goal is to show people that you are capable of doing more or being a stronger leader, or what other characteristics and skills that you want to enhance, this is one great way to do that. because you want to build a good rapport with your team. Because a lot of organizations, they talk to the team members when they do their evaluations of their leaders. And so this would be one really good way to turn around the relationship dynamics on your team. Okay. So I want you to seriously consider that. So now that we are pretty much at the end of our episode, I want you to remember that you have to exercise really good followership. It's not about giving away your authority. You're going to continue to delegate. You're going to continue to help to organize and make decisions based on the information that your team provides to you. But you're going to provide an avenue to your team to demonstrate to them that, yes, you take them seriously, that, yes, you hear them, and that, yes, you are capable of yielding to them and their level of expertise where they are. They will really appreciate it. Okay. And, you know, it's gonna help to build your confidence as well, because then I think you're going to see a little more clearly how important it is to be able to follow. You'll see this dynamic, I think, more often now that we've had this conversation. So like I said, choose at least one of those particular actions. You can give credit, you can course correct, or you can show support. And you have to determine what that looks like in the context in which you're operating, but implement it within the next 7 days. And if you're feeling really ambitious, take a dance class. Again, this is not about the actual dance outcome. This is about the process of learning. And you can tell a lot about a person by how they learn to dance, not necessarily how they dance, but how they learn to dance. And it's gonna also give you an opportunity to laugh at yourself, because we really shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. Learn to laugh at yourself. Okay. And before we close, I do have a download, a complimentary one. So I want you to take a minute to download the copy of The Leadership Behaviors Worth Leaving Behind. I think this will be very helpful for you. The link is in the show notes, and that is it. So until next time, be thoughtful, be wise, be strategic, and remember, crossroads reveal who you are. Catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters, so make it count. I'll talk to you next week.